So, I couldn't stop my curiosity and I read Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. In the opening section, he describes meeting with his father and William, who state they don't know why he's done what he's done. So, in the beginning, he says, Pa, Willie, world, here you go. And I think the main point of his justification is stated later in the book when he says, my problem has never been with the monarchy or the concept of the monarchy. It's been with the press and the sick relationship that's evolved between it and the palace. I love my mother country and I love my family and I always will. I just wish at the second darkest moment of my life they'd both been there for me, and I believe they'll look back one day and wish they had too. Throughout the memoir, he recounts the events of his entire life and states his case against the press and his family's failure to act on his and his wife's behalf. Now, most of us will have probably seen, whether we want to or not, considering how much has been posted about it, some of the shocking revelations and statements that Harry and Meghan have made concerning the horrific abuse they've received from some of the media and the public, the bickering between Harry and his family, which lead up to a physical fight between Harry and his brother William, which is recounted in here, the testy relationship between Kate and Meghan, all of which lead to Harry officially breaking away from the royal family. I think it's been well covered already how Harry openly talks in this book about his drinking and drug use, losing his virginity, and what are probably his biggest public gaffes of wearing a Nazi outfit to a fancy dress party and using a racial slur to refer to one of his friends because he, quote, wasn't thinking, and because of a, quote, failure of self-education, which he humbly admits he needs to improve. However, there were several things I read in Spare which I found surprising and I want to talk about. Some are sweet and funny, some are startlingly revealing, and some are deeply saddening. First off, he describes throughout the book how he convinced himself that his mother wasn't actually dead because it would be unbearably tragic if it was actually true, and he maintains this belief for years afterwards. Now, in many ways, this is a natural response to have this kind of magical thinking when there is a sudden death, and this is compounded by the fact of Diana's fame, who was so hounded by the press that she was desperate to escape it. So it almost seems logical that she might stage her death in order to get away from all of this. In one sense, he knows it's not rational, but another part of him maintains that his mother is still alive, and it's really moving reading about his journey of coming to terms with his grief and eventually accepting her death. Secondly, there's an endearing scene early on in his life where he describes joining his great-grandmother, who was 101 years old, in drinking gin, and how he tried to teach her Ali G's phrase of booyakasha. And it's so funny picturing this exchange across vastly different generations, and how he thought drinking gin in front of his family would be this big transgressive act, although they didn't really care about it, and his great-grandmother's confusion at this silly phrase. I was on a Scottish road trip once, and we visited the Castle of May, which was the Queen Mum's residence while she was alive, so I could really picture this exchange taking place. Next, as a big reader, I personally found it really endearing how he describes in here how one of his favorite books is John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, and it's really wonderful how he describes his deep connection with this book and the meaning he found in it, because he says it's about friendship, brotherhood, and loyalty. And John Steinbeck is such a great writer. It's really lovely to see him given a shout out in this way. Also, the memoir begins with a quote by William Faulkner, which surprised me at first, but then he says a bit it into the book that he just came across this line on the website Brainy Quotes, and he just liked it, even though he didn't have any idea who William Faulkner was. There are some quite shocking rites of passages and incidents of abuse that are inflicted upon him, which he endures with a surprising amount of equanimity. There's one gruesome incident around his 15th birthday when he describes how he was taken on a stalker initiation to hunt red deer at Balmoral, and his head is shoved in the stag's carcass after he's shot it, and he describes how this blood facial is baptismal. Later in the book, during an escape and evasions exercise for military flight pilots before deployment, he was taken to an underground bunker with some fellow soldiers where they were tortured. Harry says, "What they did to us was illegal under the rules of the Geneva Convention, and part of that torture was being told that his mother was pregnant when she died." Later, the military told him that they took it a bit too far, to which Harry responded, "Fair enough. Now, I know military training requires some extremely harsh exercises, but this is really shocking." Next, on his first trip to Paris, he instructs his driver to go through the tunnel in which Diana's car crashed, and it's moving how he describes this as part of his process of coming to terms with her loss. And also, he must have been asked about her death millions of times in interviews. So I think it's really impactful how he uses this book as a way of putting his own point of view across. But also, when he's in this tunnel and he sees how straightforward and short it is, he realizes that it could only have been through the press driving dangerously around the car, which caused the crash. This really emphasizes and adds to his understanding of the real physical danger of the press, and his anger at how the royal family doesn't intervene when damage is done. There's also, I have to talk about this, a shockingly intimate section in this book where he talks about his penis. It becomes frost-nipped when he travels to the Arctic with some wounded soldiers as part of a charity effort, and it takes a long time to heal. While trying to treat it, he took advice to apply Elizabeth Arden cream to his penis, and this is the same cream that his mother would sometimes use, and this creates this odd connection and memory to Diana. He also reveals here that he's circumcised, even though the tabloids have often reported that he's not. Finally, there's an odd flirtation in this book with the supernatural, which I found very odd and strange. At one point, he's speculating if the spirits of Wallace and Edward are hanging around. Then, much later, Meghan gives him a Christmas ornament of the Queen, which their son accidentally breaks, and he acknowledges the strange coincidence of this, but then also how he meets someone who is effectively a psychic, though he doesn't describe her as such. He says, "I wasn't sure what to call her or what exactly she did. All I knew was that she claimed to have powers and that he felt an energy around her." She, this psychic, then says that his mother is physically with him, and that Diana says, "You're living the life she couldn't. You're living the life she wanted for you." And when he asks for proof that Diana is actually there, she describes the ornament breaking and how Diana witnessed this and had a bit of a giggle about it. He leaves it at that, and this feels extremely problematic, as he's basically stating that his dead mother is on his side as a way of supporting his position. It's a way of claiming that there can be no arguments with his choices. Now, this final point is another thing which complicates the whole premise of this book, Harry really wants to convince everyone that he's right. There's no doubt that he's undergone an extreme amount of physical and mental hardship, and he's shown a lot of resilience. He's clearly a talented and dedicated soldier, and it's a shame he's not been able to continue with his military career because of the dangers to himself and his colleagues because of who he is. He talks really passionately about the charitable causes that he's engaged in, and in many ways he's just an ordinary guy that likes to shop at TK Maxx and eat Nando's, although he talks about in here how he orders Nando's during the birth of his first child in order to calm himself, which is a bit odd, but also he likes to binge watch Friends and how he feels that he's a Chandler, but also he's in this very privileged position because at one point he describes how he goes and hangs out at Courtney Cox's house. So there's this odd mixture of the mundane and the extraordinary in this book, which is, I guess, the thing that makes us so interested in the royals and in what Harry calls his fancy captivity. I do feel very sympathetic to him after reading this book, and I think it's really effective in putting forward his point of view, but I don't know if I'm convinced that he's completely in the right and the people he's speaking out against are completely in the wrong, or that anyone in this situation could be completely right or completely wrong. Overall, I'm just left feeling it's a sad state of affairs. I'm not sure if this book will work positively towards fixing things or if it's just going to fuel the fire, which he seems so desperately to want to put out. But it does really make sense that he would write and publish this book, and it seems extraordinary that we have such a candid account from one of the inner circle. Now, would I recommend reading it? I don't think I would, unless you're really interested in such a personal account, but don't expect any clear answers. If you have read this book and have any thoughts about it or any of the things that I've talked about, please let me know about that in the comments below. But thank you for watching, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.